Hey there, welcome back to another review. This time it is of the 1987 comedy drama The Secret of My Success. Now, The Secret of My Success is a film that I saw for the first time just a few days ago, and I am really glad that I did because I absolutely loved this movie. I thought this was a great film. I honestly think it's a gem, and I'm not alone because it currently has a Broadway musical adaptation that I believe is still running right now. So it definitely left its mark. It was a decent sized hit in 1987. It wasn't actually, no, it wasn't a decent sized hit. It was an enormous hit. It made $110 million worldwide on a $12 to $18 million budget. So it was a massive box office success. And I can see why. Michael J. Fox is charismatic and likable as ever in this as the lead Brantley Foster. You want him to make it in the big city. You want him to work things out, get the job, and get the girl. And yes, the plot is fairly cliched, but it works. These are cliches that still work to this day, and the big reason why is you have a character like Brantley Foster that's written in a way that makes him likable and charismatic and somebody that you root for. And then on top of that, you have Michael J. Fox, who, in my opinion, was one of the best actors at playing these kind of roles, and you have a recipe for success. So the film is directed by Herbert Ross, and Herbert Ross also produces the film. And he had done things before this like Footloose and Protocol, and he directed plays, and he did other work. I would say I actually like this more than Footloose, though, and I'm not. That's not a knock against Footloose because Footloose isn't a bad film by any means. I just like this film more. To me, it just speaks to my personal sensibilities a little bit more than Footloose did. I'm not really into dancing. I'm not really into that kind of thing. So, Footloose is just a movie that I think is all right. But I legitimately thought this was a great film for what it was. It's a lot of business politics. That's one of the main things about this plot line is about corporate yuppie politics and all of that. And it's written in a way where it's still enjoyable and entertaining and genuinely witty and funny and not boring, which is honestly kind of hard to do with this kind of plot line with big business. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just boring as sin. And I felt the script by Jim Cash, Jack Epps Jr., and A.J. Carruthers, I felt that it really did a wonderful job taking this boring subject of big business, of corporate politics, and turning it into a really enjoyable, fun time at the movies. There, Cash and Epps, yeah, Jim and Jack, they did a rewrite for this because originally the script was different. There were some different plot threads, and there were some things going on that Herbert Ross wasn't really too fond of. So neither was the studio. So they were brought in to do some rewrites, and honestly made the story and the overall script a lot better. Because the original script was about a young man working for his uncle and then falling in love with his uncle's prostitute. Universal executive Frank Price called in Jim Cash and Jack Epps to rewrite the script in 8 weeks. They changed Christy Willis from a prostitute to a mistress, and then added the complication with Aunt Vera. And Aunt Vera is one of the best things about the film, so they really did improve the film considerably. I don't think the film would be as good as it is without that extra complication or with some of the plot threads switched around to what they are in the finished product. Also, I got to give huge kudos to the writers, Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr., for doing this in 8 weeks. That's not an easy task. So, huge props goes out to them. But yeah, I mean, the screenplay, a lot of it is just strictly big business stuff. Michael J. Fox plays a character named Brantley Foster who grew up in a small town. It seems like it's somewhere in America's heartland in a farming community or something like that. And he has big dreams and big aspirations of becoming a big business guy in New York. So he takes all his money and moves to New York, and he has a job set up, but something happens and he gets laid off. So now he's got to struggle to find a job. He realizes that he has a relative, an uncle, who works in a big conglomerate. So he throws a Hail Mary, goes and meets him, and pitches to him and asks him, if he can get a job, and he gets a job in the mailroom. And then he has this harebrained scheme to take over an empty office that was vacated by this former employee who was let go and start working as a employee for the company named Carlton Whitfield, who's doing all this extra stuff on the side. So now he's got this dual identity he's trying to balance, where he's a mailroom clerk, but he's also a big business yuppie, and it all works really well. And of course, on top of that, he's also has a romance. He's fallen head over heels for this woman named Christy Willis, who works for the company, who was originally going to be portrayed by the actress Christy McNichol, but apparently the producers and the director felt that she would be difficult to work with because of her bipolar. If that's the case, that's really too bad. I honestly like Helen Slater a lot, but if the only reason why they didn't go with her is because of her bipolar, that's kind of lame. And I understand why they would have an issue with that, but maybe like ask her like, hey, do you need some extra help? Or maybe at least give her a chance. Who knows? Like maybe she'd be able to handle herself well. Maybe she would have been on her medication. I mean, that little bit of trivia is honestly pretty lame. But still like Helen Slater, Supergirl herself as Christy. She definitely has a really stunning look about her, and really did add a lot of the ethereal, dreamlike quality that her character had and throughout the film. So ultimately, I think it was probably a good choice. Margaret Whitton as Vera, she steals the show, runs away with it, and I already knew of her because of her performance in the film Major League, where she played the stuck-up bitch owner of the Indians. This guy is dead. We'll cross him off then. uh, I've always liked that performance. Now I can add this performance to the list of great performances by this actress. Like, she was absolutely amazing in this role. She was a total horn dog, a total cougar. She was actually pretty damn hot. And on top of that, she had great comic timing. And I thought she was just really a blast. I thought she was just great. She was a good foil for both Richard Jordan and Michael J. Fox in this film. The rest of the cast is fine too. John Pankow as Fred. Fred Gwynne has a bit role as Donald Davenport, but it's a very small role. You also have Mercedes Rule, who you might have seen in a few other things. She was a character named Sheila in this one. I'm trying to remember who the guy is who's like his friend. Yeah, there's a friend of his. Oh yeah, Art Thomas, the character. I think it's Gary Bamman, but I could be wrong. But there's this character who's honestly, he's a lot like Clayton Rohner. Like, this guy is essentially Clayton Rohner, but different. Like, there was a clone of Clayton Rohner, but something went wrong, so they're not entirely identical. But I did like him. He was fun too. You also have a character actor, Christopher Murney, who played a guy named Radigan, who's Michael J. Fox's character's boss in the mailroom, and he was a total douchebag. That guy played a lot of roles like that in the 80s. He was in Maximum Overdrive. He was the Bible salesman in that film. So that's where I remember him from, was the Bible salesman in Maximum Overdrive. But yeah, overall, Good cast, really good cast, especially the lead, Richard Jordan, uh, who played a great villain. He always plays great villains. He's another character actor who does a really remarkable job playing really nasty, unlikable characters. And it just made it, when he got his comeuppance in the end, it made it even more enjoyable and crowd pleasing. But yeah, this is really Michael J. Fox's film, and it's a film for him to shine. And boy, does he! He's got so much energy and life in this, and it honestly is a bit bittersweet considering what he's dealing with right now with Parkinson's and so on and so forth. And when I was watching this, I was just reminded of just how truly talented and just a joy to watch Michael J. Fox was in his prime. He just had that everyman charisma that was just so appealing in a multitude of different ways. This film also has a excellent soundtrack, so many great songs. Um, you have the title track "Secret of My Success" by Night Ranger, in my opinion, one of their best songs. You got "Sometimes the Good Guys Finish First" by Pat Benatar, who's one of my favorite artists and singers. You have "The Price of Love," which is a really good love song by Roger Daltrey from The Who. Um, you also have "Don't Ask the Reason Why" by Restless Heart, which is an incredibly overlooked, underrated ballad that has a really great instrumental track to it. And I've honestly been low key addicted to that song. Like, I really like that song. I think it's an excellent track. And you also have "Heaven and the Heartaches" by Taxi, which is another good one. The score by David Foster, I felt fit the film well. Apparently, there might be some unused work by John Williams in this, but I don't know the full details of it. I just see it on IMDb where they're talking about how there is some little unused cues from the film in here, but I don't really I can't really tell for sure exactly which unused cues they are. And also, the plot for this film was lifted from a real life experience of Steven Spielberg, because apparently it was inspired by the early Hollywood experiences of Steven Spielberg, who snuck onto the Universal Studios lot at a young age and began using an empty office as his own production office. The character of Brantley Foster does the same thing in this film, which I didn't just blew my mind that Steven Spielberg had a backstory like that. He was actually a bad boy at one time. Steven Spielberg was a rebel. It's something that you never would have thought was the case, but it was. Now, the film, even though it did incredibly well in the box office, and it didn't do that well with critics. There were a lot of critics that just gave it mixed reviews. A lot of people talking about they don't really like the screwball antics, the slapstick. They didn't. They felt it reminded them too much of some other movie that had a similar plot from the '60s. I think it's like How to Succeed in Business Without Even Trying. I think that's what it was called. Uh, and I noticed that with a lot of critics, they tend to knock films for reminding them of other movies that had similar plot lines. Like, oh, this movie is bad because this other movie did this beforehand. And I'm like, why does that make a film bad just because it has a similar plot line as a film that came out previously? We're talking about stories here, and there's no such thing as original story, or I mean, in terms of a completely original story, especially not back in 1987, and definitely not now. So I think that's really unfair to judge a film that way, to be like, oh, it's bad because it reminded me of this movie. I just it's just such a weak criticism, if you ask me. But audiences really enjoyed it, and I can definitely see why. And there's also some other really clever bits in this I want to mention before I'm done here. For one, there's a really hilarious Jaws parody in this that comes out of nowhere. And it's a scene where Vera is stalking Brantley in her pool, and he's trying to get away, and he's trying like, no, I don't want to have an affair with my boss's wife, leave me alone. And he's in the pool, and the Jaws music plays, and that might be where the John Williams music bit of trivia is mentioned, because I don't remember anything about unused music, but I do know that the Jaws theme is in this film. And so the Jaws theme starts playing while she's trying to hunt for his dick, essentially, taking his shorts off and trying to go after him. It's a really it's a really great use of the Jaws theme, and a really fun idea, and hilarious concept. And this film has some really hilarious, fun concepts in it. The climax is just one series of misadventures where all the three main characters, Brantley, Vera, and Christy, are all at the Howard's mansion, and they're all trying to find one another to essentially get it on. So Vera's trying to find Brantley so she can make love to him, and Prescott Howard, he's trying to find Christy, and all the while you have Michael J. Fox, Brantley, he's trying to find Christy. So it's just this series of misadventures, and the lights are off, and it's really an old school kind of bit, but it works really well, and it's shot really well too. Speaking of shot really well, that's definitely something I wanted to point out, is the cinematography by Carlo di Palma. Now, apparently the cinematography was intentionally made to look dreamlike, because it was supposed to look like the characters' ideas and dreams of what their fantasies would be like, and what their ideal scenarios in life would be. And you can tell, and I think it's a great choice. I love the way the film looks, the dreamlike quality of it. I love it. I think the cinematography is a real treat. And I also felt it was well edited too by Paul Hirsch, and in particular, I really liked the choice to have some moments where the fourth wall is broken, because there's sequences in the film where Brantley's speaking to the camera, and he's talking about what his plans are, and there's some really unique bits of editing in this that I definitely really enjoyed. And speaking of things that I enjoy, then we go back to other comedic bits in this that I thought were really fun. For instance, Brantley, he gets fired from his job, and then he goes to this payphone, and he's going to call his parents and talk to them and tell his parents about what's going on. And then while he's on the payphone with his parents, there's a robbery that's taking place right next to him, and there's all this gunfire, and he's getting shot at, and he's telling his mom, "Oh, that's just Miami Vice." It was like, why is it so loud? Like, turn it down. I can't. The knob is broken. So, what an absolute hellish first day in New York for poor Brantley. He he loses his job. He gets shot at. Um, but of course, it all works out in the end, because sometimes the good guys finish first. But anyway, I definitely did feel that was a pretty fun sequence. And then one of the biggest gut busters in this film is when Michael J. Fox, his character Brantley, he's living in an apartment in a shithole in New York City somewhere, and he's trying to work on his business stuff, some papers and whatever, and he's having a hard time focusing because the next door neighbors are having loud and boisterous sex that are just banging the walls. And so he comes up with this really just hilarious idea to grab something. I think it's like 2 salt and pepper shakers or something. So he grabs a couple of things, and he just starts conducting the loud and boisterous sex to the point of climax. And it's such an absurd concept, and you would think like there's no way that would work. but it works so well because of Michael J. Fox's energy, and it's just hilarious. So, yeah, I definitely would recommend this one, especially if you're a fan of Michael J. Fox. This is one of his best roles and one of his best films. Even if you're not that into big business storylines dealing with yuppies and paperwork and corporations and all of that, I still think you'll find a lot to enjoy with this one. Um, this really needs to be released on Blu-ray in the U.S. I'm hoping Kino Lorber does it because they made a deal with Universal recently. So I'm hoping this is one of the titles that they're going to release because it was a big hit when it came out. You got Michael J. Fox, who is a really endearing and lovable guy that a lot of people love his work. So I think it would probably do fairly well if they decided to release it. It does have an overseas release. Uh, I don't know what the transfer is like though. I do know that this DVD has a transfer that hasn't aged well because it's one of those ones where the picture is kind of scrunched a little bit, but if you adjust things properly on your modern TVs, it can work okay. But it's not the best transfer at all, and it definitely could use an upgrade. I know Michael J. Fox is dealing with Parkinson's and whatever, but if they can get him to talk about the film, I would love to hear his thoughts on it. If not, get some other people to give their thoughts on the experience and what it was like to shoot the film and any fun stories that they have to share. Because I would just love to hear from people who were involved with working on this one because it seemed like it was a fun shoot. And overall, it's just a really fun movie. It's a great throwback 80s comedy, drama, the kind where you can just turn your brain off and sit back and just enjoy, and just does a wonderful job at transporting you to a place where there really isn't much of a care in the world and where you just get sucked into the story and you just want the good guy to finish first. And that's exactly, like I said, I mean, it's not really much of a spoiler because you know with these kind of movies that it's going to have a happy ending, and of course it does. Brantley gets the big job and he gets what he wants and gets the girl and lives happily ever after. And you know what? That's honestly sometimes all we want out of these kind of films. It's the entertainment, and we want to see them win in the end, and that's what makes them so repeatedly enjoyable to watch. Is because things work out, and it also represents a fantasy of how we want things to work out. And honestly, this film is shot like a dream. So, and it's all about the American dream. So, yeah, it's only fitting that it ends the way that most people want their dreams to end, with their dreams coming true and becoming a reality. But anyway, I don't really know what else to say about The Secret of My Success, except thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.